This weekend we had an ambitious trip to Cheddar Gorge with William, where there would be lots of steep walking, as well as some cave experiences. It was going to be a warm, sunny one, which William tends to like most. At the gorge, William initially seemed uncertain, but he calmed a lot after a quick trip to a toilet to do his thing with the water. After that, we went to the bigger of two accessible caves. William seemed very happy to explore this, definitely focusing on the drips and drops of water he could spot, but also taking in some displays of prehistoric animals that popped up in places. He was particularly delighted when we came across some pools of water he could investigate, and we spent a long time at these. Towards the end of our cave experience, William was showing some signs of dysregulation, but he was quickly fine when we got outside to the sunshine and headed to a cafe for lunch. At the cafe, my wife and I were a bit concerned because William was so hungry before getting his lunch that he had to go through a few of his snacks. We had visions of him being done and wanting to go by the time our lunches arrived. However, William turned out being fine to carry on munching for a good while, so it was actually a pretty relaxed lunch in the end. Next, we had our big exertion of the day, doing the Clifftop Walk around the gorge. We got up to this by climbing the 274 steps of Jacob's Ladder. I say we, but William climbed none of these. However, at the top, he was strangely eager to climb the steps of a lookout tower by himself, maybe because he could see the destination. We carried on with the Clifftop Walk, which was a steep climb for much of the first part, as we headed up the length of the gorge. William had some time exploring on foot, but I mostly carried him for this section. Thankfully, I'm getting accustomed to this, William's favourite and most demanded form of travelling, but it was always a nice break when he was happy to get down. This was the case when we got to downhill sections. In fact, William was keen to run down these, with me doing my best to keep up and keep my footing. Just when it must have seemed to William like we'd done our share of clifftop walking, we crossed the road at the top of Cheddar Gorge and took to the cliffs on the opposite side. Thankfully, this was a mostly downhill section, following the slope of the gorge, but there was certainly some steep climbing involved to get up to the clifftop initially. William did more of this himself, and at the top we all had a nice break, with William for once not seeming desperate to be running or sensory seeking. This changed pretty soon when we got to the downward parts of our walk. I enjoyed these, and was amused by how quickly William flew past other walkers, with me in tow. We finished our Cheddar Gorge outing with a visit to the other main cave, where there were audio recordings telling an interesting, immersive story about the role of water in cave formation. We had to skip over much of this, but it was still nice to take in a few bits of information. Our trip to Cheddar Gorge was certainly ambitious, but at the end of the day, my wife and I felt it had been a worthwhile outing and workout. I think William felt the same.